Given what you said about the morning and ketones generally being lower, when do you recommend people measure?
So there's no consensus about this. There's a lot of disagreement about when the best time is to measure, and that's because in a certain way, it doesn't really matter. I do recommend measuring once a day, and if you are going to measure once a day, that you measure at roughly the same time every day, like within the same 2-hour window or something. Um, I personally, though, I like people to measure first thing in the morning, fasting. That's not what everybody will tell you, but there are pros and cons to different timings. The reason I like people to measure first thing in the morning when they're still fasting is, okay, yes, that may be when your ketone levels are lowest because of circadian rhythm. Ketone levels do tend to rise. If you're following a ketogenic diet, or even if you're fasting, your ketone levels tend to rise slowly throughout the day, and they tend to peak at around dinner time. So a lot of people like to measure later in the day before dinner because that's when they're highest. And that's great. It's really nice to see nice, robust ketone levels on the meter. But I want to know not just if you're in ketosis right before dinner. I want to know if you're in ketosis most of the time. I want to know if you're in ketosis even when you first wake up in the morning. Because if you wake up and your ketones are 0.3, it's going to take hours for you, following a relatively strict plan. You might even need to fast to get those ketones into the range you want. And I have found in my clinical work that most people do better when they're in ketosis most of the time, not just that they have to claw their way there and get there by 6 o'clock in the evening. Then who knows, you might only be in ketosis for a few hours every day. And for people with serious mental health issues, that's usually not going to be enough. So even though they might be lower in the morning, they're still, if you're following a good enough plan, they're still going to be there. They might not be 2 or 3. They might be 0.8 or 1.1, but that's great. If you wake up and your ketones are 0.8, you're doing well. You're doing better than most people. Most people eating a standard diet are going to wake up with ketones either undetectable or usually no more than 0.3. And to be in ketosis, the metabolic magic begins to happen at 0.5, 0.5 millimoles per liter on a blood meter. That's when the metabolic magic starts to happen. That's the threshold. Doesn't mean it's high enough for everybody, but below that, you're really not, and you're not getting the metabolic benefits of ketosis.
Can you talk to the different ways of measuring ketones and pros and cons?
Yes. So there are 3 main ways to measure ketones. So one is a blood ketone meter. We've talked about this quite a bit already. It's a relatively inexpensive meter. The strips maybe cost 80 cents to $1 a piece, depending on which manufacturer you're buying from. So you've got a small blood meter, a pinprick of blood, a tiny little spot of blood, using a blood strip, and then it measures, within 10 seconds, you get a reading on your meter. And that's going to be in millimoles per liter, and that's measuring beta hydroxybutyrate, which is a stable ketone in the blood. So that's the best way to do it because it's the most accurate. Another way to measure is with a urine strip. So just passing the strip into a stream of urine, waiting a short period of time, and to see if the strip changes color. And the more deeply it changes color, the more ketones are in the bladder. But this is a different type of ketone. This ketone is acetoacetate, not beta hydroxybutyrate. Acetoacetate is less stable in the blood, and so some of it gets lost in the urine. So what you're measuring there, you're not measuring blood ketone levels, you're measuring how much of that particular ketone, acetoacetate, is being lost in the urine. And it's going to depend on whether you're dehydrated or well hydrated, how long it's been since you last emptied your bladder, all kinds of other things. So it's going to be a much more crude kind of estimate of whether you're in ketosis or not. It's really, I think of it more of as a yes-no, as opposed to being a reliable measure of what your ketone level actually is. It's almost looking backwards in time to what your ketone levels have been over the past few hours since you last emptied your bladder. So it's still great. I mean, it was the only way to measure ketones for a long time before we had blood meters, and it's very good, but it's not as accurate, and it can sometimes be confusing. But it's painless, and it's a lot less expensive than a blood meter. The third way is with breath meter, and the breath meter measures a different molecule called acetone, and that's another ketone body that is exhaled out of the lungs in your breath. And I think these meters are getting better, but the ones that we've had access to until pretty recently, they've been kind of finicky. The technique needs to be just right to get you can measure 10 times with the same meter and have in 10 times in a minute, and you see completely different readings because it depends on how fast you're exhaling and how strongly and so forth. So there's some finickiness to that method. Still, again, it's painless, and the meter is very expensive, but you don't need strips. So over time, it saves you money. So I recommend that everybody, if they can afford to, measure however they can. But if you can afford to, and if you are okay with a pinprick, the blood meter of beta-hydroxybutyrate is the gold standard. It's the one that's used in research testing. It's the one that I use in my clinical work for everybody who's willing and able to do it.
Since you made it to the end of this clip, I know you're going to love the full episode. Click here to watch. I'll see you over there.
What if your healthy diet has been the problem all along? That's what a lot of people are discovering. There's real power in feeding your brain properly and letting it try to